when you're firing on all cylinders, when you're aligned with yourself, when you have however you describe it yourself, whatever that is, right? Like that flow that goes through you, when you can tangibly feel that positive energy that sort of propels you and motivates you, you know that the world just gets a little bit better, right? You know that like things just tend to sort of fall into place. There seems to be more opportunity. And what's happening is, I would dare say, and obviously this is just my opinion, right? But I would dare to say that it's the universe, in whatever that means to you, becoming something that your filters are experiencing as a place of possibility instead of a place of threat, or a place of failure, or a place of humiliation or shame, or unfairness, any of those things that come up. And when you get into this mindset of I'm at my best, now nothing changes around you. I promise you, nothing changes around you. But all of a sudden you're looking through this different filter, right? You're looking through the eyes of someone who is expecting to see positivity, who's expecting to see possibility. And all of a sudden things shift, not because they've actually shifted, but because you move toward them. And so I think when you're working with yourself, or when you're working with your clients, and you're up against something that is very specific, like specific in that it's attached to a goal or an outcome, I think it's really, really important, and your responsibility as a coach, to make sure that you're not just opening up this idea that you can change the belief and somehow magically there's going to be a flow that's going to come from out there, external, just because the belief is shifted. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're putting the person at effect of their now new improved belief. And so I'll give you an example. I think like if I'm working with someone, I work with single women, right? Some single women who are like desperate for a relationship. And I say desperate very specifically because that's how they feel. And I've worked with a lot of women like this along the way. And very often, if they come from a certain school of thought, or if they've been doing a lot of, personal development work with a certain sort of paradigm of thinking, they'll believe it's on them, right? That they just need to believe that they are lovable, or that they are worthy enough, or that they are a good partner, or they would be a beauty in somebody's life, or whatever it is, right? And they'll come to me and they'll say, I know that I don't really believe this. I have doubt about what a good partner I would be, or if I'm really worthy of love, or if anyone could actually see me as beautiful. I don't believe anyone can see me as beautiful. So how could I ever be seen as beautiful? And so I would go there with them. I would go into those beliefs, but I think it would be a disservice if all I did was change the belief. So if all I do with somebody is change a belief from I am not lovable to I am lovable, and then, have them go out there and live with their new belief, there's a whole bunch missing there, right? So it's possible that could make things better. It's possible that they could actually go to work the next day and they would smile more at people, and they would maybe believe the smiles that are coming back at them, or something like that. But it would serve me well and my client well to have the conversation about, like, okay, what does being lovable mean to you? Right? What's your complex equivalence of being lovable? And the more I can sort of bear down on the elements that they don't realize consciously that they have accumulated as a whole string of things that they maybe can't be or cannot do. Because what might happen is they're going to say to me, well, being lovable is someone who is, really upbeat. And maybe they're not upbeat. So what good is it for me to change their belief of I am lovable if now they're stuck with, like, okay, I'm lovable, but further back in there is this program running that says, well, I have to be upbeat to actually be lovable. And now it's not as if that wouldn't necessarily correct itself, but it's not a given at all. And I would be much more likely to be successful as a coach if what I look at is, okay, let's talk about this idea of being upbeat being some sort of quality that is necessary to be lovable. And we may not do any belief work here, just some reframing. right? It may just take some of the language skills that you have, the reframing stuff that you have. And let's make sure that before I go in and do the belief I am lovable, that we have the whole matrix, the whole idea of being lovable as something that is achievable for my client, right? Because if my client says to be lovable, I have to be 5'7" and blonde and whatever else, and they're not, well, we need to change some stuff ahead of that, right? So I guess what's really important to me in conversations like this that I have with clients is to make sure that you've kind of remember to stay focused on what the ultimate goal is, because it's really important that my client does come out the other side feeling and believing fully that they are lovable. But I need to do a bit of the back work of just making sure that we have those pieces in line. And again, most of it I find can be reshaped just with reframing and everything else. Sometimes though, it may also be a belief that you need to work on before you work on that one, right? So it may be, well, I don't know, people will always compare me to others. Maybe they've grown up with some belief that they can feel good about themselves until they're compared to somebody else. And then as soon as there's a comparison, then they can't feel lovable anymore. I had a woman who had a belief structured like that, where it was like, as soon as there was a comparison, it just dropped her right out, right? So that's something that we had to go and do some work on first.
For those of you, I'll jump in for a sec. For those of you who chunk up, there's a theme here that you have to set the conditions for success. So the success of the belief change requires pre-work. So then you chunk back down into what Tara's saying about the individual things. And I think what I heard with Tara, if she just went in and worked with one of those clients and changed the belief about lovable, she actually creates a potential for a lot of other conflict and disappointment and sadness by not looking at what are the conditions to precedent for being lovable. What does it mean to be lovable? What's a complex equivalent for that? Right. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if it's about lovable or attracting money or competency or anything. I think Tara is really, really stressing a holistic approach to what seems like a single issue problem.
Yeah. And I think in terms of money, in terms of making money or being successful as a coach, because I do a lot of coaching with coaches, it's all good and well to believe that you are deserving of money and that you believe in your own abundance and all that kind of stuff. But you've really got to pare back and look at, well, what does that involve for you? What are the things that you want to do? Not that you're willing to do, but that you want to do that are actually going to directly contribute to the success that you want to have for yourself. And I think sometimes we get so focused on the goal and on the belief structure around it. So if you follow me, there's a goal of like, I want to make money, or I want to be successful. And then there's all this mindset stuff that you think you have to have, a belief in your own abundance, a belief that you can make money, a belief that you can be successful in your own, whatever it is. And those are all the beliefs. And that's where everyone stays focused. But there's this whole other like huge amount of work that is the stuff that you're going to do minute by minute, day by day, that is going to contribute, that's going to create the systems that will actually create the goal and support those mindsets. And I think as a coach, it's our job to make sure that we're making those as realistic and as possible, to the point where I would say that those need to be, you need to work with your client individually, and you probably need to sort of bookend them. It's a good idea for the person, if they have a belief that they cannot be successful, you may need to work with that belief first to make sure they do believe they can be successful. Then backtrack into all the stuff they've got to do, make sure that they're capable of doing whatever they need to do to get successful. And then once you've done all of that work, now you reinforce that they can be successful again, and it's going to resonate at a whole different level, right? So you sort of bookend it with these things, but make sure that you fill in those holes and that you understand it.
But when Tara said, when you change a belief, things may not flow instantly from the universe in, but what it actually allows you to do is become more aware and more open to the opportunities. If you chose and you wanted to connect that to NLP and neuroscience, that's very easy to connect, because I believe it's absolutely true. When we clear the beliefs about who we are and what are the criteria for achieving that, we change the filter specifically the deletion filter, the three primary filters, right? Delete, distort, and generalize. We're actually affecting our three primary filters when we do belief change work. So we become more open. The 134 bits per second coming in now, when I change some of the belief structure, are different. They corroborate my belief structure. And now we're open to the possibility. We're actually open to the universe. The universe is around us all the time. Our belief structure either shuts us down. So if I believe the world's a terrible place, my deletion filter only lets in information that corroborates how bad the universe is. If I wake up and I start smelling the roses, my deletion filter now lets in information that corroborates, man, roses smell beautiful. So changing beliefs is not just about changing beliefs, it's about changing that filter. And then if you connect it to Lisa Feldman Barrett's work about how emotions are made, if you can change some beliefs and your brain start predicting that, hey, there is more opportunity for me, there is more abundance available to me, now your brain start predicting more success. And when you encounter opportunities to be successful, you are more successful. And the last piece of all of that is, if you go to the original Secret movie, go to the original Secret movie and write down the names of every one of those people who presents in The Secret. And then go look at their literature about what their daily routine is. They are beasts for routine, discipline, knowing what they do, knowing how to do it. John Assaraf, Joe Dispenza is a beast. You don't disturb Joe between 4 a.m. and when he comes out ready to deal with the world. He'll rip you. That's his time, right? Tony Robbins talks about attracting abundance, yet he has these rigorous morning rituals that he does every day. If it was just about Tony sitting in his living room thinking he's worthy, he thinks he's worthy. But why does he do all these other things every day? Oprah Winfrey, why was she relentless at getting messages out? Is relentless, right? So I think that's one of the things that we, that when we create the belief structure and write our story for this year and next year and the other, that story has to be implemented with passion. And it's hard to be passionate about doing things you don't like to do. My first business mentor, I remember the exact moment he shared this with me. He was 34, a retired multi-millionaire. And he was living across the street from me in the Okanagan. And we became friends because I had a Mac computer and he was investing in businesses and he wanted to know what I could do on a Mac computer. The year is 1984. And we're driving in his Mercedes-Benz up the hill back to where we lived. And I said, if you could teach me one thing, what would you teach me to do for success? He said, Alan, I would teach you to do the things you don't like to do, because everything else is easy. Everything else is easy, right? So at the end of the day, we get our story right. And now when we have our story right, now we look for the things that are holding us back. And we look for not just the belief, but the constellation of beliefs that support that belief. And we take those out and we move forward, right? We look for the things, but we need to have our story right. We need to have our narrative, our plan, our map of the territory. And Tanya, you all came in at 7:35, but Tanya was the first up in the chat room on my screen. So there you go. So Tanya gets a 90-minute session there to review her narrative. But I'd like to see all your stories, to be honest. Whether it's a 5-minute or 15-minute conversation, when you write your narrative for this year, who are you going to be on December 31st, 2022? What will you have done? How many lives will you change? What will you see? What will you do? How will you get there? What has to happen for you to do it? It's beautiful. Of course you can.
I want to just add one thing. That idea of the stuff that you like to do and the stuff that you don't like to do. I think there's some really interesting, James Clear speaks to it really well, I think, in terms of, you want to make sure that you're good at the stuff that you don't like to do, because of course you still have to do it, right? There is no way to escape that there is a tremendous amount of just sort of like tedious shit that you have to do. James Clear. And it's important that you do help your clients and help yourself figure out how to do that stuff that they don't like. That said, I think if you can ask, when you ask the question, this thing that I don't like to do, is it going to lead me to doing something that I do in fact like to do? The answer has to be yes. And when it's something in and of itself that you don't like to do, that you're doing simply to like make money or something, then you can probably come up with some way of doing better. So what I mean is, like, there's a bunch of stuff, right? So there's a bunch of discipline stuff that is definitely going to accelerate your success and everything else. But say it's something like, I don't know, in order to be successful, I'm going to use my example because it's the easiest one. But like, in order to be successful as a coach, I have to go on Facebook and do lives every week. And that's going to put me out there, and it's going to, the truth is, I would rather, I don't know, rather do
shovel snow. You'd rather shovel snow.
I would rather shovel snow every day than go on Facebook Live. It's just not an activity I like doing. It's not something I enjoy doing. And when I ask the question, is this something that will lead to something that I like? No, probably not. What it's going to lead to is me doing more lives. It's possible that a year or two, or who knows, that it could, I don't know, launch me so far that I'd never have to do another live or something. But it's not structured that way. It's not something that, and so the truth is that, like, do I love to do invoicing? No, I don't like it. But do I like the results that it gets me? Like my clients actually paying me? Oh yeah. That is something I don't like doing that I will do. Do I like, that there's a number of things, that I don't necessarily like doing. But I think it's really important that if you start having these big things that you do, that you don't actually like doing, but you think it's going to lead you to something that you do like doing, that you get really realistic about that, right? You get really, because I've watched so many people who have gone through the process of, like, they do this thing because they think it's going to lead them to X. They think it's going to lead them to clients, or they think it's going to lead them to like bigger public speaking gigs. And so they're going around, every 3 days speaking at some place where they have an audience of 3, and that is fantastic if what you ultimately want to do is speak to audiences, right? Put in your time, do your year or 2 where you're speaking to really small audiences and let it grow, and stay at it. But if you don't really want to be speaking anyway, that's not really what you're after. What you really want to be doing is coaching, and you were just sort of told that, like, if you speak here, it's going to lead to bigger speaking gigs, which is then going to lead to clients, and that's ultimately your goal. You can probably come up with more creative ways to do things that are more up your alley, that you're actually going to like doing, rather than forcing yourself to do the things that you really don't like doing. And again, you've got to make sure that you're not dealing with just like fear of, right? If I was fearful of doing lives, but ultimately if I imagined myself not having fear, I would love to do them, then I would want to overcome the fear and do them anyway. But if it's simply a preference, if it's just simply a preference of personality, of who you are, we all have different preferences, right? I know people who love doing stuff like that. They love it. And if they could be successful doing that, they would do it all day long. And then I know people that absolutely would not like to do it. And if they could just do their thing, whatever their thing is, they would prefer to do that. And I think you need to be really honoring and respectful. And it's a good time, I think, at like the start of a year, to kind of really assess those 2 lists of, like, how much am I doing that I'm really genuinely enjoying? How much am I doing that I'm not enjoying? And are these 2 lists okay? Are they going to get me, am I going to enjoy my life while I get to my goal? Because you don't want to just be suffering to get to a goal, right? You want to be enjoying the whole ride.
And when I say, Pat wanted to teach me how to do the things I most dislike to do. Mm-hmm. When you get enough throughput, you can also delegate, right? That was one of his messages. Don't do the things that weigh you down, bring you down. If you're a coach and you're billing out at $250 an hour and you're doing bookkeeping at $25 an hour, that's dumb. Okay, that's really, really dumb. Don't do it. But if social media, like when I'm talking about trauma, nobody else, I can't delegate that, right? I cannot delegate that. Right? And there's some things about content and other things we do around here, I will not delegate. I choose not to delegate. I don't want to delegate. They're my things. So you have to get really clear about that whole list. Unless you have a roadmap, unless you have a map of where you're going, how you're going to get there, you won't have a list of things. You'll be carrying them around in your head and it'll be weighing you down. They'll be spinning around and you'll do them as they come to the front of your head. And then you'll forget them for a week or two. But if you have a plan, if you know that every Tuesday is invoicing day, then you'll do your invoicing on Tuesday. Like Tara Guzzo and I talked one day, and I got a lot out of the session because she was talking about how she organizes her week, right? Monday is for one activity, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is for another, and Friday is for another, right? So it's a nice day, so every Monday, you know what you're doing, right? So every Monday, if I did that same thing, then every Monday would be every Monday would be admin day, every Tuesday would be social media day, and I'd see clients Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's an example. And then this, as Tara said, if I was doing things I didn't like to do on any of the days, then I would just do it knowing I'm going to go to a day that I like all my day, right? I mean, if I could just spend 8 hours a day with clients, that's all I would do. And in fact, if I could spend 8 hours a day in front of an audience, that's all I would do. I would just teach 5 days a week. But I have to do other things to get there. And some of the things that you want to do, like I don't believe as an NLP trainer, I should train unless I'm coaching. That's just my rule. It's not a rule. I know lots of NLP trainers who don't coach at all. They just train. They just sell trainings and train. But I don't believe I can do that. I don't believe that would be appropriate for me. I can only train because I'm coaching, right? That's my rule. So I coach and I like coaching and I train and I like that even more. How many people have done David Shepard's internal hard drive? How many people have done David Shepard's internal hard drive? 1, 2, 3, 4. I would really highly recommend you download it and do it. David Shepard's a master trainer out of the UK, prolific. And it's an exercise to look through your life at what brings you joy and pleasure. And to best describe yourself, quote unquote, on purpose. When you're living with purpose, on purpose. And it's a really good exercise. And we use it in PACE as a transition tool to go people from the deep, dark, negative step 3 into the positive step 4, because it's connecting to joy and fulfillment throughout your life. So it's a great transition tool. But I think as NLP coaches and as NLP trainers, it's a great tool to revisit regularly. And what a better time than as you write your story for 2022 to just reconnect to your purpose, right? And the other thing, everybody who's done PACE training has done prime concerns. Almost everybody who writes their story for their plan writes to their strengths. It's our natural instinct. But unless you're addressing the prime concern, unless your plan actually addresses your prime concern, you'll write it to your strengths and you won't feel fulfilled at the end of the year. I think there's less chance of you feeling fulfilled. However, if your plan addresses your prime concern, it helps you achieve that thing which is your prime concern, you'll have a much greater sense of fulfillment, and I believe you'll have a much greater sense of congruency, right? So Tara and I are both best at starting things, right? And we're both worst at stopping things. And of course, the question for people who are worse at stopping is, what is it that you're not having that you want to have? Well, the answer to that question, it's the same question asked to me and Tara, but the answers are radically different, right? What is it that you're not getting that you want to have? So when Tara writes her story for 2022, that's why we can't write a story. We can write a plan for inspired outcomes such that both Tara's story and my story gets fulfilled, but we can't write an us story because Tara's prime concern and my prime concern is different. What is it that we're not getting that we need to have? And of course, if you're worst at starting, it'll be who is it that you're not being that you want to be? And if you're worst at changing things, it would be what is it that you're not doing that you want to do? But again, when you write a plan that addresses your prime concern, and if anybody doesn't know about prime concerns, you just book a consult with me and I'll do it with you. When you write your story for 2022, if it addresses your prime concern, again, it's one of those things that gives you momentum. And if you write your story for 2022 in your visual, auditory, or kinesthetic predicates, and in your meta program style, if you're a move away from, write a move away from story. If you're a move towards person, write a move towards story. If you're a global person, write a bloody global story. And if you're a details person, write a detail story. If you're an introvert, write a really long story. If you're extrovert, write a short story. Right? Write a story that resonates with you. That's one of the fallacies of writing business plans, going to a business planning school at business school. It's written in a business context. It doesn't, we're all NLP people. We know. And lovely. We're all NLP people. We know about rapport. Well, the number one person you have to be in rapport with when you write your story is who? Yourself. You have to be in rapport with yourself. When you finish writing your story, you should be in love with your story for this year. It should make you feel warm and fuzzy. And when you envision actualizing that story, you should be in love with the person, the results, where you get to at the end of that story in December 31st, 2022, I think. Let's open it up. It's after 8. Let's open it up to Q&A, T, unless you have more to add right now. Would you like? No, you're good. Let's go around the room. Everybody had an okay holiday. Everybody got to see all the family members. Lee, you were in Mexico. You didn't see anybody. Feliz Navidad. Cool.
No, I hung out with some of my fabulous friends here. So it was an orphan. Yeah.
Yeah, expat Christmases are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
Everybody's
questions.
pretty quiet. Yeah. Who has a question?
I do.
Okay, go.
I have questions. Go. I'm wondering about two things. One is a simple question, I think, to answer. The other might be a little bit more involved. Question number one, the simple one is, in core transformation, at what juncture do we grow up the part? Does that happen after you've chained back before the timeline stuff, or does it happen after the timeline stuff?
Grow up the part before the timeline stuff. So you would
Before.
you go out to the core state, you reverse the core state, you come back. You would only do the timeline stuff. You can future pace and do the timeline stuff if you want. If you're choosing not to grow up the part, then you could decide that you're going to bring them back to conception and grow up the part that way, and then future pace it. But if you're not going to do that, then you're just going to go on to growing up the part, and then you grow up the part, and then you do the timeline stuff after.
Okay, that explains why I was like, why are we doing this so many times? Okay. Okay, thank you.
When Tara first saw Connie Ray Andreas, and I forget where you saw it, I think on YouTube, do core transformation or somewhere, that script says go back and forth on the timeline 6 to 7 times.
Oh, yeah.
You're imprinting it in your core state, right? So there's no harm in multiplicity there.
Yeah.
It still says that. Still says you can do it up to 6 times.
Yeah. Okay, next question is a client question. Thank you for that. So we just did the big 5, and guilt, looking back on guilt in the past, it was cleared, and then future guilt came up, and there's something really specific that she's anticipating in the future based on one thing that she did in the past that she's feeling guilty about. And the one thing is part of her old pattern, a very significant part of her old pattern. I suggested that we pin it and we clear it in using the trauma model. Do you need more details, or do you feel like that's enough for you to answer my question? Okay.
It for me, so you're clearing guilt and you clear the gestalt of guilt. And then when you go to future pace it, there's some hook from the future to some event in the past. I think that events, this is just the world according to Alan, there's no empirical evidence for this, but you could have an event in a guilt, a significant emotional event that is not part of the gestalt of guilt. It's contextually different enough and has other emotions that it's sitting out here alone. So you're absolutely right. Just tell them, can we just park that till the next session? We'll clear it. You could clear it with negative emotions too, where you clear all the emotions out, or clear it with the trauma model, either one. But that's just my theory on those. And I run into them, not a lot, but not infrequently either, that sometimes they just have a thing. And I think you did the exact right thing. You cannot.
And so it's just that flavor of guilt is just, it could be called guilt, but it's coded like slightly differently. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's enmeshed with some other stuff.
Yeah.
That it's not going to let go on a simple clearing of gestalt of guilt. And again, no empirical evidence on that, just hundreds of clients, and it happens 2 or 3 times.
Perfect.
Tara's had the same experience for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So before we let Larissa ask a question, those of you who are old enough to remember the movie Cheers, whenever Cliff came into the bar, everybody would go cheers. And so kind of like in a Cheers-like moment, whenever I hear somebody say, I was wondering, I want everybody to go, and it's good to wonder, right? I was wondering, and it's good to wonder, because that means, here you go. Okay, Larissa.
Wait. I just want to add something to Tanya.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to tell you what I have found with guilt very often. Guilt is much older, right? It's a more sophisticated emotion. It's not something that you can really experience before about the age of 6 or 7. Like it's just not, we're not structured that way, right? Because your brain doesn't have the capacity to do empathy until you're somewhere around 6. So people will dispute this all the time because they'll talk about their dogs and their little toddlers and stuff feeling guilty, but they don't. It's not guilt they're experiencing. Kids can anticipate letting somebody down, and that feels really bad. When they have done something wrong, it feels really bad because they anticipate the response and the reaction they're going to get. They can also be very sympathetic. So a child can be sympathetic. So there is a way for a child to like imagine that somebody is feeling bad and that causes them to feel bad, but they don't have empathy yet. Okay. So children, when they're very, very young like that, they just don't have the structures in their brains. They don't have the capacity to be able to imagine themselves in somebody else's circumstance and situation and then feel badly about it. So guilt is this structured thing that doesn't happen till later. And sometimes guilt is very, 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 very contextualized, right? So I don't feel guilty when I step on an ant, but somebody else may.
What?
I actually kind of do. You may not feel guilty when you step on an ant, but I do, right? You may not feel guilty for picking an apple off of somebody's apple tree, but I do. Or I may feel guilt, right? So it's so learned. I mean, so much more so than other emotions, right? So much more so than you must have conditions of life in order to feel guilt. Guilt does not exist without rules. You have to learn the rules first, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's so important to know. There has to be rules and there has to be a judgment about, was that a bad thing or not? We can feel sad just for sadness. We can fear and anger are amygdala kicking in.
Yeah.
But guilt is not.
Guilt is having not, it's broken a set of rules, right? And caused harm because of it. So sometimes what people experience as guilt young is very confusing and it's very different. Some people will actually feel anger in place of guilt, or so it's one that I wouldn't, we clear it because it's so important to clear it. It's such a prominent emotion that it's really important to clear, but it is the one. I would tell you that it is the emotion that there is no way on God's green earth that you're going to clear guilt and somebody is going to go forth in their life no longer feeling guilt.
Inappropriate
Or unwarranted, because that is not up to them, right? So they're going to go into situations, they still have to evaluate rules every single time. So they may, when I know personally, when I clear guilt for the next little while, I have a much better way of being accountable to the things that I should or shouldn't feel guilt about. And I have a much clearer head around being able to sort of like navigate that emotion and sort of like say I feel guilty because my parents are watching my kids and it took me an hour longer. So I start to feel guilty, right? Because they've now watched them an hour longer than I said that they would need to. Now, does that actually warrant guilt? I don't know. Do you know? Who's the authority on that? Right? Who out there has the right answer on whether guilt is a warranted and appropriate emotion? That is not possible. I'm sorry. It's simply not, right? It would depend on so many conditions. And you would have a really, really, really good argument either way, right? So it's not one that you're going to calibrate the same as the other emotions. And so whenever it comes up after you've cleared guilt initially, just know that you're likely working with a limiting decision. Don't keep clearing guilt because you're just, so you've got to look at like what particular, guilty about, so I feel guilty when is going to be more useful from that point forward. Still clear it with Big Five because it's so important to do. But after that, just always be asking the question, I feel guilty when, and you're going to pick up the structures of guilt that this person may be more likely to feel unwarranted and inappropriate guilt around.
Remember that a limiting decision, if you clear a limiting decision, it's more like a negative emotions too, right? Because you go right down into the event. And a decision will also have negative emotions in it. We make decisions and limiting decisions, especially when there's negative emotions around. You all good with that, Tanya? Cool. Larissa, then Tara.
All right, thank you. I guess I was just, I've been doing a lot of boundary work within my sessions. So it's not necessarily part of the PACE format. I've been doing it typically like around the 3 to 4 area. It's varied a little bit with different clients, but I guess where would you put boundary work in to PACE? And do you guys do it? Do you follow a structured protocol, or like, how do you guys work with boundaries?
I've never done structured boundary work. I've always found I don't do much strategy work either. Yet I do a ton of strategy work by clearing all the negative emotions, all the trauma, all the limiting decisions. The strategies that the person showed up with, both presenting and root problem strategies, no longer fire. So I don't have to go in and do strategy work specifically. That's been my same experience with boundaries. That when the person has cleared their limiting decisions, whatever, their boundaries, what they're willing to accept. Like I have a really contemporary client, a client who I just finished 6B with, and we never cleared boundaries, but in clearing her traumas and clearing her significant emotional events and the decisions and beliefs that came after those, she immediately constructed new boundaries in her life and acted on them. And I do tasks though, right in PACE, we'll talk about, it's up to them to take massive action to enforce their new beliefs, boundaries, and behaviors. So it's implicit in that, and remind them every time of the 3 requisites for change that they have to. And so again, I don't do specific boundary work, but Tara, you might address that. And yes, it's not in PACE, and I don't have a technique for it per se.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, it's because it's usually all caught up in LDs, right? I mean, you're always dealing with parts and limiting decisions. So normally in terms of boundaries, it's going to show up as if it's something in the way. It would be interesting, Bill, Larissa. Like, I think that I've had some clients who come specifically for boundary issues, right? So I'm working with a woman right now who that is what the breakthrough is on her being able to set boundaries and establish and maintain boundaries.
Yeah, I have a needs and wants sheet. Like I do a needs and wants analysis, and then I have them just do some boundary questions, but it's just like, that seems to be something like, well, after people do that, it's just been really,
really powerful for them. And they like finally put themselves in the driver's seat from like, it's not like they feel like they can take charge because they have structure around it. So
Yeah.
it's very
I think it's
VL
great. I don't know. I would just
lack of VL for everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, I would just put it in. I mean, whatever you're doing with it, if it's working, it's worth just drop it in wherever it seems to work and share it with us. If it seems to be something that's
Yeah, I'll
really-
send you a worksheet that I send them, and then I literally just go through it with them. But I've been spending like, I mean, different amounts of time with different people, but they're finding it really, really helpful. So
Yeah, I'd be really interested if it's something that once it's established, if it holds, right? Because those are, you know, this one woman right now I'm working with on boundaries. The boundaries themselves are just so tough to hold because of all of her beliefs, because of all of her trauma, because of all of her stuff, right? So the I think for some people it would make sense that it would be such a good exercise to get clarity on those boundaries, because that could be the problem, that
Yeah.
there isn't clarity. And then for some people, it's like, despite the clarity, there's so much more work to be done to hold the boundaries. So,
yeah, I find for me, like we have a discussion, they do their worksheet, and then like from the first couple of sessions, they're already starting to change them. But
Yeah.
then by the time they actually fill in the sheet, they're in that powerful position to do something about it. And it's been a game changer for the people I've been working with. And
Yeah, cool.
I think
I'd
it's
love,
gonna
I'd,
people. So
yep, I'd love to see it. If you're willing to share it, that'd be great.
I'll send it over.
Tara Guzzo.
I'm wondering,
It's good to wonder.
you everyone, what are the dates for MasterPack 2022?
It starts the first Saturday after the Canada Day, whatever day that is.
Officially, for sure.
Yeah. What is Canada Day? What's the date on Canada, or what's the day of the week on Canada Day this year?
Let's see. Canada Day is on Friday, so then it would be Saturday the 9th. Oh, like the very next day, like the second.
No, no, it won't be that weekend.
It'd
It'll be
be
the
a
following
weekend.
weekend.
So the 9th.
Yeah.
9th. Yeah, that sounds right. It started on the 10th this year.
Yeah, 14 days.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Is it like 2 weeks straight?
Yep.
We give you one day off in the middle.
Did we? I don't think we did.
Well, we gave him a break at some point, gave him an afternoon or something.
Yeah, I mean, a couple hours maybe. Once you're
It's
tranced out,
gonna be like 1 to 8 or 12 to 7 or something. It'll be like an afternoon, evening, as opposed to mornings. It's really helpful for a lot of people. They can get work done or see clients even, or whatever in the morning. You still get part of a work day. And then I think it will likely be 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. We also need to allow for people on the West Coast, of course, you guys. And even potentially we've got people interested who are in other parts of the world. And so that timing works a lot better to do it into the,
And
and it
just
just
for-
tends to
and-
help.
and just for a lot of clarity, math, it will not be a 7-hour day. It'll be an 8-hour day. We take 2 15-minute breaks and an hour break for lunch. So an hour and a half from an 8-hour day, we get 6.5 hours of training in. Tara just said 7-hour days. They're 8-hour days.
And we encourage anyone who can to come in person. Gotta
Yeah.
believe by July we'll have this thing under control and we can meet in person safely. It'd be awesome. And we'll help you arrange where to stay if you decide to come and do it in person. We'd like to
Other
set
questions?
at my parents' house.
Yeah, well, your parents.
What is
Airbnb.
the investment?
Like 5,000.
No, Tara doesn't know anything that has to do with numbers. Okay, Tara, from this moment on, if it's a question that has to do with numbers, she does
7
not
hours
know.
days and $5,000. And you get to stay with my mom and dad.
Yeah. The rack rate on it is $6,495, but normally we do a couple specials in the spring. So we'll do that. And it'll be somewhere around $5,500 on the special, and then it'll go 59 and it'll be 64 if you book the day before. You know those things that you don't like to do? Tara doesn't like to do numbers, right? So she wings it all the time. No, it's about $5. I think that's fine. Yeah. Other questions? Tanya, you're in, right? Tara, are you in this summer for Master Prac? Tara's in as well. Cool. We've got a good course starting up. I don't know. I haven't gone around the room yet, but I'll do it later.
We might have convinced Danby too to come.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Listen.
Allison, yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
It is, it's an intense 2 weeks, but I don't know, in terms of growth, personal growth, my own experience, I've done Master Prac twice now, and once 30 years ago and once, I don't know, 7 years ago now. And just the experience when you come out of it is so different. Like, I can't explain it, but it's different.
We're going to do lots of healing this year.
Yeah, and this year it's our healing Master Prac again. So,
Harry.
okay, guys, other questions? Who else has a question?
Carrie's
Hey, Carrie Fisher.
Hi. So is Master Prac just the follow-up to the course that I did, like the NLP Prac course?
Yeah, the NLP training sort of hierarchy goes, normally you would find some information session, then you go into master or practitioner training, and then Master Prac, and then if you want to be a trainer, you'd go to do trainer's training. And in our school, we do practitioner. And then if you want to coach, we encourage you to do the PACE course, because Prac and PACE together allows you to be a highly, highly effective coach. And then if you want to expand the body of knowledge and understanding of what works and get more healing information, you would attend Master Prac. And we teach quite a bit more material, because Prac is only about 25% of the body of knowledge of NLP. And when you finish Master Prac, you're up at about 80% of the body and knowledge of NLP. And then when you do trainer's training, you've got more of it.
Master Prac really gives you the language, like it you know, where Prac teaches you the tools and the techniques and really outlines the structure. When you get into Master Prac, you start learning the actual language of NLP. That's when you don't have to rely on tools so much, right? So when you're working with a client, you're not having to look for this specific technique, but instead you understand the objective of where you're moving your client, and you have the whole breadth of work that you can use to sort of bring it all together, and you can really sort of ad lib, and it allows you to be much, much more flexible as a practitioner. And it is on a personal development side of things, it's pretty wild.
And our Master Prac, we actually have a PACE-based wellness breakthrough structured. So it's the workbook's already built for you, and everybody will do a health and wellness breakthrough on that. So if you've got something bugging you, man, that's the place to get it. You end up getting a $3,000 health breakthrough in the middle of your Master Prac course.